Welcome to the only podcast for piano teachers just starting out, Piano Teacher Primer. My name is Angela Toon. Keep listening for the prime pro tips you can use with your own students right away. Want to welcome Abigail Profitt to the Piano Teacher Primer podcast. So yay and welcome. And we're so excited to hear from her. So first, tell us how you got started teaching piano.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be here and it's great to meet you, by the way.
You too.
So my piano teaching story is kind of funny. Like I laugh when I tell students this. So when I was like 8 or 9, I was begging to quit piano. And then around 10 is when I taught my first lesson. So I tell my students, like, if they start to hit that rut, I'm like, just wait another year or two. You might hit that spot where you want to teach.
Oh my goodness, you were 10 years old?
So I taught my first lesson when I was 10. I had played like some solo in church or something. And some moms came up to me afterwards and they were like, can you teach our kids to play the piano? So I had 3 students when I was 10 and they paid me $2 a lesson. And I taught them for a good year or 2. So I had my full studio at 10 years old.
That is so awesome.
World, but they did. So.
Oh my goodness, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Was your teacher or your mom helping you, or how did you know what to do with them?
So I was classically trained. I had been taking piano for 5 years at that point. And I would go back to my piano lesson and tell my teacher what I was doing or like what I was stuck on. And she would kind of give me some pointers on how to introduce those new concepts. And I was teaching my students in the church library that had like an upright in there. And there was these old John Thompson Method books in there. I had no idea how to use them, but that's what I did.
The classic.
So I was using those, and yeah, that's where my love started. Like I just realized I really enjoyed doing that. And I loved seeing these music makers develop. I was teaching composition with what very little I knew at that point, but I just practiced like writing out notation with them and stuff like that. So then when I was 12, I raised my rate to $5.
Whoa, gave yourself a raise. I'm laughing because I have a 10-year-old daughter, and
yeah, it's crazy.
I can't really imagine her teaching right
now. So I had a couple students then, and then I lived in, when I started high school, my parents and I moved to New York City.
Wow.
And I started my actual studio there when I was 15, and I had 9 students in New York. So that's where I say I started teaching piano, because that's when I was actually a little more knowledgeable about what I was doing, and I had more performance experience and all that. And then I decided when I was 17 that I wanted to major in piano pedagogy, piano teaching in college. So I went on and got my degree in that. And while I was in college, I taught at a music school in New York, where I had 26 students there. And then I taught for a couple of years at a music school in Texas, and I had almost 40 there. So I feel like I kind of expedited my teaching experience that way, just by getting tons and tons of students and learning really fast.
Wow.
And my 2 oldest siblings are also teachers, and they're both 15 years older than me. So I get to watch them, like their successes, and learn from them. So I feel like all those factors really helped kind of fast track my teaching experience.
Wow. Yeah.
But I graduated with my degree a year ago now, and I have my
congratulations.
Thank you. And I have my private studio now of 33 students in Texas. So that's my
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, but you don't just teach, I know, because we're friends already on Instagram. And I know that you have a ton of other things. Tell us about all the other awesome stuff that you're doing that has grown out of your teaching and your needs in your studio.
Yeah, so I have an online shop helping other teachers called WholeFoundation Method. And I've also
whole like WHOLE.
Like whole note. Yeah.
Like whole note. WholeFoundation Method. We'll link it for sure.
Okay. And I started that really because I needed tools for my students that I couldn't find online. I'm really picky about what I use with them. And I noticed like a lot of the games that I was finding just weren't productive. Like they kill time and they're fun, but they weren't very pedagogically helpful. So that's why I started creating games that I can actually use to teach new concepts to my students and just kind of mix up lessons, especially since I really like that 3 to 5 year old age. You can't keep them on the bench the whole time. So
it's a losing battle.
Yeah. And then kind of as a result of that, I was getting a lot of questions from teachers as they started to get traction on Instagram and stuff, like questions about my teaching approach and how I use games and all that. So some courses have sprung from that. I've launched 2 courses now, kind of just answering questions that I've gotten, and I have more courses in the works. So
yay. Are those through Etsy or are those on a different site?
They're also available. I'm working on my website now, but right now everything is on Etsy.
On Etsy. Okay, awesome. So we'll just link to that and then they can find you from there. Just a curious question, because I did pedagogy classes at the University of Utah. Did they have you use a certain method in your 2 different experiences there?
They had us use piano adventures, but our pedagogy instructor, she was kind of the umbrella over it all. She didn't love it, but it was the standard that the university had used for years. And they're actually this year starting to Celebrate Piano, which is what I teach out of now. And that's really fun. Piano. That's really fun because she was an amazing pedagogy mentor to me. And recently she was like, okay, I'm going to change the whole curriculum. Do you think I should do Safari or Celebrate? And I was like, Celebrate. So that was fun to be part of that new track that the future pedagogy students will be on.
I want to make sure to link everything that we said. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I
use I use a mixture of methods and depending on the needs of the student.
Me too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, rad. Okay, so I wanted to move now into your top 3 tips for beginning piano teachers. So give us the first one, and then you can elaborate and explain.
Okay. On the track of method books. So I've taught, like I said, in several music schools, and I also taught from books I didn't know what I was doing in. So I would encourage any new teacher to really know the method books that are out there and know the supplementary material available, because especially when you get transfer students coming in with a book you've never taught before, you're really not going to know how to approach them if you don't understand their background a little bit. So I would just encourage you to dig into the approaches of each method book, how they work, what the long-term results are, because they all kind of reap a different track. And then no solo work, because that's the secret sauce to enriching and kind of securing that musical foundation. And it's really nice to know what you have for recitals and stuff like that.
Yes. What makes a good recital piece?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I so agree. And there's so much out there. It can be overwhelming and to figure out what you want to teach. So do you kind of have a base curriculum and then supplement from there, or are you always trying new things?
Yeah, when I was, especially at music school, so I was required at the school in New York to use Alfred's basic piano library. And that's what I grew up on. So I was really familiar with that. And then at the Texas music school, I had to use Piano Adventures. And now I use Celebrate Piano as my base, which is basically the method book series that precedes the Royal Conservatory Celebration series. So all the RCM level repertoire. So that's my base method book, but I supplement a lot with Melody Bover and Gilak and Glover, all the classic people. But I also like Music Tree and Piano Safari for some students. So it kind of just depends on their needs.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Tip number 2.
be willing to try new things, but do not try them all at once.
That's good advice.
When I was like in the middle of my degree, I was learning all the new things. I was like, I got to implement all of these right away. And I just felt really confused all the time. And it was not a productive lesson experience. So it's important to keep learning, but don't constantly introduce new things. Like, give each new concept a little time to marinate with you and your student, and then maybe introduce something else in a few weeks, but don't do it all at once.
So good. And I find if I'm getting sort of bored or restless, I might just need to change the pieces that I'm teaching and just really teach what I want to teach and what I want to be listening to all the time. And I'm thinking sometimes that I'm doing things that the kids want to do, but then I'm just like, bored or something. And so, I agree. Be willing to try new things. And sometimes in my mind, I'm like, if I have a set curriculum, then I'll just be good and I'll know exactly what to tell everybody. But students all have different needs.
Yeah.
And like I had 2 twins and I'm like, I don't want to start them on the same method because they are going to be competitive on who's ahead and it's going to be weird. So I started them on 2 different methods at the same time. So they had no idea where the other one was. And then that was fun for me to try out a new method at the same time.
Yeah.
So
and trying along the lines of trying new things, like I figured out a pattern that works for me, which I kind of got this idea from Christina Whitlock. We all love her.
She has the Beyond Measure podcast.
Yes, she's incredible. Like, introduce new things one at a time and gradually. So maybe try that new thing for a few months at a time. So like during the course of the year, I teach all year through the summer and school year. I might have like the summer be our sight reading summer, where we're just really going to town on sight playing pretty simple music, maybe doing extra music games. So it feels lighter, but they're still kind of enriching those aspects that we might not focus on as much throughout the year. And then fall might be like a practice challenge where everyone is competing with practice days or something. So we're learning a lot about practice strategies or memory strategies. And then another part of the year will be a recital focus. So kind of keeping things changed up and introducing new things that way so that you don't get stagnant, but you're not crowding the students with new stuff all the time.
Yeah, having a focus for a season. That's a good suggestion. And then if you feel like you're kind of lacking in your teaching in a certain area, you can make that your next focus. I love that.
Yeah, like a composition focus or a performance focus, that kind of thing.
I love that. That is a great idea, or an extra challenge to go with it. Yeah. That's so cool. And sight reading in the summer makes sense because that's crazy.
What my teacher did. And I always loved summer because I was like, oh, we can take a break from like going so hard after the repertoire and just fill in those blanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, tip number 3 when you're done.
So this is kind of what you were saying earlier, but just remember that one size does not fit all with your students. You are not just teaching piano, you're teaching individuals. So yeah, we're piano teachers, but our primary focus isn't teaching keys on the keyboard. It's teaching the person in front of you, right? So rather than just like turning the next page in the method book and hoping that you're going to get the same results with each student, plan for their individual interests and their individual needs, because some will do better with one method series, like you were saying. Some might need extra off the bench time, like those 3 to 5 year olds. So you might need to plan specific games for their needs. Some are hands-on learners, some just like the theory aspect. You know, there's going to be a lot of different nuances with each student. So just plan for that individuality and don't resent it if they don't all fit your curriculum or your ideal, framework. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. And that's why I love teaching private lessons, because I can be a different teacher for each student that comes in the door. Right. And it's a beautiful thing. And then And then, yeah, I can tailor whatever we choose to that student, and then tailor the growth to that student as long as they're growing, improving themselves. I also heard you on another podcast talking about, was it ADHD?
ADHD and autism. Yeah.
And autism. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that too. That's another individual. I have a student with special needs also, and we have a completely different agenda for that one.
Yeah, I think the beauty in private teaching, but especially teaching neurodivergent students, is that you don't have to have an agenda with them, because each milestone they make is a celebration, because that's their milestone. It's not being compared to anyone else's. And it removes a lot of stress for you as the teacher if you don't have this curriculum set of expectations of every student. It's like, we're going to take you where you are and celebrate your milestones. So yeah, I specialize in preschool piano, but also neurodivergent students. So I have a very individualized experience for them. Particularly my autistic students, I give them a lot of say in the lessons. I have like a activity mat with little squares that they can fill in with pictures. I have a bunch of picture cards with different activities they can do, and they choose what happens in their lesson. So I just have to be very spontaneous and ready with a sharp brain for how I'm going to accommodate their choices, because I don't know what they're going to pick that day. And that's where it's important too, to know your books and know your repertoire, because they might choose a book you weren't planning to teach that day, so.
And you've got to have things ready to grab, because you were describing some of the games and things. Tell us a little bit about organization. Do you have all your games easy to grab?
I'm the organization queen.
Yeah, you are. Give me some tips, because I got this new studio and I'm like, I need games easy to grab. Where do I put them?
So I organize my games seasonally, and I think it's funny that I have such a big online business selling games, because I actually don't use all of my games very often. I mean, I use them, but I use them seasonally. So I will choose maybe 2 or 3 for certain concepts. Like I have sections in my game binder, a rhythm section, an interval section, and a note reading or ear training section. I'll kind of switch those up. And then I'll choose 2 or 3 seasonal games to go in each of those sections. And that way students get used to those games. They're not learning something new every week, because it takes a lot of time to learn a new game. And I'll just kind of cycle through that. And then in the next 2 months, I'll choose a different set of games to go in the binder. So I have the rest of my games in my teaching closet, organized by season and concept. And then I'll just cycle through the binder that I use on a regular basis.
And they're just in the binder, so you can just open it up and play right there.
And they're all categorized. Like I have tabs that I can flip to for each concept.
Smart. And then you can go straight to the concept that student needs.
Yeah.
So
and
smart.
I don't lesson plan every week, but when I feel like a student is getting kind of stagnant, or I call it lazy teaching. If I find myself just starting to flip to the next page every lesson, I'm like, okay, I'm being lazy. I'm not planning for their needs. I will sit down and lesson plan, and I will plan in what game they need for what concept they're struggling with. So I don't use them to kill time. I really do try to use games to fill in those needs.
And reinforce areas that they might be weak in. Oh, you've inspired me. That is so awesome. Yeah. And then having it all contained, but then specific to that season, and then changing it out.
Yeah. And they love when it's like season changing. Oh, we have fresh games now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, and then they can pick the order of their lesson. Cause I've noticed some special needs kids want the same every week. And then some like to mix it up. So.
Yeah. For example, I have twins who are both autistic. And one of the twins could sit at the piano the whole time and just play her music, because she loves the repertoire. The other twin is like, I can't handle more than 2 songs, She's like, we have to be on the floor playing games. So I use the cards more for her than her sister, and her sister will pick out cards and then forget that she picked them out, because she's sitting at the bench the whole time. She's like, oh, we didn't do these 5 things.
That's
Different things
cute.
work for different people.
That's so
They're
cute.
adorable.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant.
A
Brilliant.
lot of
Maybe you
people
could send me a photo. Could you send me a photo of your game board, or do you have it handy? You could show it.
Yeah, I mean, I have one on my Instagram, so I can pull it up here. I will
Okay.
say I get a lot of questions about how I make time for the activities on that map because there's
Mhm.
6 total squares. And I will just say students with ADHD or autism have very short attention spans for those activities they pick. So it's really a student-paced lesson. We might spend 5 or 10 minutes on each card, or even 2 minutes, so it's very
Mhm.
quick. It's just touching on those concepts.
Mm.
So this is what it looks like. It
Cute.
has 6 squares, and then I will choose like maybe 10 cards for them to pick from.
Mm.
They don't get the whole stack every time because it would just take way too long. But you can
Mhm.
see I even put pictures of their piano books on some of the cards so they can pick which book they want to do that
Which
day.
book they want to do. Good.
Yeah.
Good. That is so cool. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Any final advice for beginning teachers?
I just be easy on yourself because it's
Mm.
going to take a while to find your niche and your rhythm. And you might feel a lot of pressure to have it all figured out, but just like focus on strengthening one skill at a time. Don't try to perfect it all at once.
Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Well, thank you again for coming on with me. I love it so much. And I took some good notes too. And I love what you said. Each milestone is a celebration. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Lots of
And
little
good
parties.
luck with your studio and your courses and your Etsy shop
Thank
and all the
you.
great things. Thanks again.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining me on this episode. Teaching piano has given me a fun and fulfilling way to add to my family income. With over 20 years of experience, I've put together my best advice into the Piano Teacher Primer course. It gives the motivation to start teaching and the confidence to keep going. We can multiply the joy of music and multiply income at the same time. Visit angelatune.com and together we'll change the world one student at a time.